We've got an unusual terror warning from the feds.
We live in perilous times. The consequences of war and social injustice will affect every person on the globe.
Good evening, everyone. America is on high alert tonight.
There is no justice without freedom, and there can be no human rights without human liberty.
If the ideals of justice, freedom, and liberty are to be more than empty rhetoric, people must form an educated opinion about the issues that concern them. People have a right to know.
Don't take your cheap little pathetic shot.
But serious news and informed debate on which democracy depends are disappearing from television, the medium most people rely on for news and information.
Every American to support our military, and if they can't do that, just shut up.
We need a television network with the courage and ability to investigate, report, and debate without bending to government or corporate pressure. Independent World Television will be such a network.
If we do not have an independent press, and by me independent, I mean not only independent from government, but independent from the major corporations that run the society, then we will not be able to assure a continued access by the public to all the information they need to function as citizens.
The federal government saw this natural catastrophe. They had days of ample warning, and military forces that should have been deployed were sitting there doing absolutely nothing. I was heartened to see the mainstream U.S. media actually showing signs of acting like true journalists. This was good. The rebukes were too polite, as if any attack on the president or his men wasn't the proper thing to do.
Generally, we don't hear from poor people. We hear from the experts or maybe the direct service providers, if we're lucky, that actually deal with poor people. Most poor Americans are white, and we don't see them. We don't see folks in rural America or Appalachia or Native Americans or people living in barrios. We don't even know what that environment looks like anymore.
It used to be that we would get coverage of labor union issues when there were strikes. Now, that may or may not be the case. Certainly there's some coverage of large strikes, but there's not much coverage of underlying issues that lead to those disputes.
I'm the editor of Harper's Magazine, and this month we have a cover story about the number of soldiers who are AWOL, who are in fact deserting. I would have thought that that was the kind of story that other instruments of the news media would want to pick up. But no, because the story is one that the major media really don't want to hear.
What's needed is a place that really values the story and not the bottom line. There's no investigative reporting going on. They're not covering the global economy and the victims and the ecological degradation.
Well, one of the most staggering items to come out of the UNAIDS report was the projection that 85 million people will die in Africa alone over the next 2 decades. This should be a lead story, and yet, because it's affecting primarily at this point people in Africa, it just didn't make it onto the TV news that night.
Can you imagine the difference in what the HIV/AIDS pandemic is doing to Africa and what the bird flu situation is doing to Europe or Asia? You will find massive differences, and yet the AIDS issue doesn't take prominence.
On every continent, there are people who understand that they're not getting all the news they need to get, that they're not seeing a reflection of themselves and their concerns in the media that they consume.
Our newspaper spends a lot of resources and time in investigating corruption, which we see as something that will neutralize all the benefits of democracy. Finding the information of crony capitalism around the world, that has been our difficulty. You're not going to see it on CNN and probably not on the BBC either.
You may have some independent voice occasionally given a chance, but you do not have independent television programming.
In this situation, independent world television becomes, I mean, it's a crying kind of need of the hour. there is a pent-up demand for this. In India, there will be enough numbers, huge numbers, who would be subscribers to such a channel to see something rational.
I really think that the problem that we have is, as much as we have a choice of media, we don't have enough depth of content. Far from transferring knowledge to us, I think there's a sense that, at least I have as a viewer, that I'm being managed or manipulated in some way.
One of the things that we don't want to do is to destroy the infrastructure of Iraq, because in a few days we're going to own that country.
Target Iraq. Operation Iraqi Freedom. Powell said Saddam might have tens of thousands of liters of anthrax.
What you see is the truth, and it is reality, and we are very, very confident in what we presented today.
This administration has been particularly determined to control information. They have a strategy called information dominance, which drives the Pentagon. Info war.
We can destroy an Iraqi tank under a bridge without damaging the bridge.
Every weapon is precision guided, deadly accuracy designed to kill only the targets, not innocent civilians.
They got to work with a big lie that Saddam Hussein was working with Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. But if your president and vice president, one will, on Monday will say that they worked together for 9/11, and on Tuesday the other one will say it, they just go back and forth. Repetition, repetition, repetition. What's that? The secret of advertising. Rinse-o white, rinse-o white, rinse-o white. That's how it's done. And we were rinse-o wetted into the wars.
From my point of view, which is a conservative American point of view, unfortunately, with our embedded journalists, we get little snippets of what the Army and the Department of Defense and the administration wants us to see.
As you're going to war, if you criticize the war, you're not patriotic. Once you go to war, if you criticize the war, you don't support the troops. Once the troops begin to die and you criticize the war, you desecrate their graves. So the effort to marginalize dissenting voices is very, very powerful.
After 9/11, there really was some fear in the newsroom. Anchors, correspondents were afraid of being labeled unpatriotic. It was almost seen as treason to be questioning actions of the government.
No one has been held accountable for a war that's killed over 100,000 people.
They very clearly know that their lives are not counted. You don't mourn as we do. You don't feel as we do. Your blood is cheap. That's the message. I think the deeper effect has to do with the way this feeds the tremendous rage.
Too few people own too many outlets. Newspaper owners own TV stations own publishers. And so it goes. And so our republic went. There are two presidential elections in a row where the people's will has not been expressed.
I think most journalists would rather do real reporting, the sort of thing that independent world television could do.
People across the political spectrum are saying, how did they get it so wrong? This is a real opportunity to bring together media that didn't do that, that didn't get it wrong.
I'm a print journalist, and I feel this very keenly, because there clearly are limits for what print journalists can do, because we need this amplifying effect that really seems to only come from television.
The IWT idea of forging partnerships and alliances with the best that is available in print, I think, is a splendid idea. It has a tremendous future.
I think independent world television would actually give substance to what we are doing here in Africa.
Large chunks of the world are very ready for a network of news that's not CNN, that's not the BBC, and that's not only Sky.
We think the message of independent journalism, independent of government funding, corporate funding, and commercial advertising, that's a message of political transformation. It's not just about another television network. It's really about a movement for democracy.
One of the things that's really exciting about IWT News is that I'm seeing come together to support this project a coalition of people I've never seen work together before, a united front. It's time that we come up with a project that will make a difference in all of our lives.
We need to change the economics of journalism. And we all of us who understand the necessity for this, and there's millions of us, we need to put our money where our mouth is.
It was incredible to watch little gifts of 50 and $100 add up to millions of dollars. This immense sense of wonder really emerged, and a growing faith in the capacity of the public at large.
The day this seemed possible to me was February the 15th, 2003, when at least 20 million people around the world demonstrated against the war in Iraq. To have that sense of urgency, to have that sense of commitment, to have such a worldwide consciousness was unprecedented. And it occurred to me, if we could harness the economic power of the passion those people felt, that we could now fund an independent television network.
IWT is the one thing you can do right now, immediately, to make your change in the world. This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands. And if everyone wrote a $50 check who cares about this issue, we'd have enough money to make the greatest TV network that's ever been known in the world, to change the media. And that's the power we hold. We have to do it.
Independent World Television will be journalism and debate that doesn't bow to corporate or government pressure. The heart of the network will be IWTnews Nightly, an uncompromising source for international news. IWT News will be seen on digital cable, satellite television, and the web. In the United States, we are collaborating with Link TV and will be available on satellite in over 25 million U.S. homes. First, we are building an online community, hundreds of thousands of people who will help us create an international fundraising campaign. It's possible, but it takes your support and participation to make it a reality. Here's what you can do. Visit our website, read our plan, tell us what you think. Tell your friends and neighbors. Help us build our internet army. Your financial contribution can make independent world television happen. With your support, IWT News can break the monopoly on information. Tell the world you want to know. Tell the world you have a right to know. Help us build independent world television.